right, good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, July 13th, 2015, and this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Monday, everybody. Monday should be canceled, but at least it's sunny and 74 degrees here in upstate New York. I managed to power wash my deck over the last 3 days and finally got that finished, so I'm kind of happy. But hey, guess what? I just came out into the UCY studio, i.e., my little room in the garage, and the air conditioner that has to stay on 24/7 out here to keep it cool enough so this garage doesn't burn up with all these computers out here has seemed to have shit the bed. And not only has it seemed to have shit the bed, but it looks like it must be leaking water or something, and it's in behind my paint now under the window. Damn it. So guess what? I need to, I think, go purchase a new air conditioner sooner rather than later. It gets very hot in here very quickly, so that totally bites. I just literally 30 seconds ago saw that as I walked in here. So anyway, hope everyone had an awesome weekend. Mine was a lot of work, but I actually feel quite accomplished. You know, when you have that big disaster that you need to tackle and you don't want to tackle it, and you've been putting it off for eons and eons, and finally you just bit it off, and then you did it, and then it's all done, and it looks really nice. So I'm happy. I look at my back door and I go, wow, I can't believe it's the same deck. So that was good. It produced a little bit of dopamine there, didn't it? No, I don't know if it's dopamine, but speaking of dopamine, that's what we're going to take a look at in one. I know we did so many dopamine stories yesterday or last week. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it this week, I don't think. Maybe not, though. But there were a couple stories that I wanted to hit on that, of course, I found over the weekend. And one was about smoking. I don't know if you guys saw that. They didn't say it, but I decoded some of what they were saying in here about smoking and psychosis. And then I want to finish that story about the monkey brains that I ended with last week. So let's take a look here. I just want to look at what we hit on Friday. So we titled the show Friday, Revisionist History, Idiocracy, and the BrainNet interface. That BrainNet interface was, of course, this horrifying experiment that we only had a few minutes to look at, and I'm going to, I think, kick it off there today. We also looked at how sugar makes you stupid. Sugar helps you produce dopamine, we discovered, as does fatty foods. Dopamine, of course, causes you to get all of those narcissistic and psychopathic traits that we heard that excellent interview yesterday with Nathan Frazier on Live Free FM. He had a guest out of Denmark who had moved to the United States, and in viewing and living amongst Americans, he came to realize that there's this massive disease that is overtaking many portions of the world. And Denmark had already succumbed to it, but it's this whole disorder of being concerned about yourself and being overly sensitive to things, and this narcissistic, psychopathic disorder that we've been talking about. I know I'm going in circles. Didn't make any sense, but he was absolutely on the money. It was late. I stayed up late all weekend too. I'm burning the candle at both ends, so don't mind me. I'm only on sip number 5 of coffee, but he was absolutely right. The one thing though that I saw that he did not hit upon in his discussion was how dopamine can cause all of the things that he was talking about in this addiction to dopamine. Anyway, so we talked about this Confederate flag bullshit and people getting all crazy about and oversensitive about symbols, and they're even going as far as digging Confederate soldiers and the guy's wife up out of their grave and moving them. I mean, when I see what's happening, I get so disturbed, people. And some days I don't even want to do this anymore. I just want to pretend that it's not happening, because it's like an invasion of the body snatchers, except that we're the last few left. And I mean, and it's not a fantasy. We're the last few sprinklings of people left that are out there that can still use their brain and critically think and look and say, well, wait a second, 2 + 2 does not equal 5, but everyone else is just going along with the status quo, and they've been pre-programmed to suck in information and regurgitate it, not to process it. And we are the ones left that are processing this information and calling bullshit. So anyway, from the Mad Science Gone Mad file, yes, monkey brain net raises prospect of human brain-to-brain connection. And of course, this is exactly all of the nightmares that we have been talking about. The good old brain project that's being financed by multinational institutions and governments. And DARPA and Kurzweil, the head of engineering at Google, rubbing their hands together in anticipation for being able to upload themselves. It says in 2 separate experiments, scientists have formed a network from the brains of monkeys and rats, allowing them to cooperate and learn as a superbrain. Scientists have linked together the brains of 3 monkeys, allowing the animals to join forces and control an avatar arm in research that raises the prospect of direct brain-to-brain interfaces in humans. Something else that we've been discovering, too, with this dopamine addiction is that there is a complete and utter lack of morals. And morals, like, instead of being a moral code, like thou shalt not kill, morals have become subjective. So when you're looking at a situation, well, maybe it is good to steal in some circumstances, and then maybe it's not. I mean, since when have morals become negotiable? Maybe it is okay to take these 3 little monkeys and cut their heads open and wire their brains up together just to see what happens. I mean, what psycho planet are you from that it's okay to take any living creatures? And I know they do lots of animal experimentation, and please don't even let me start thinking about it, because that stuff gets me very upset and very mad. But in what planet do we live in where it is acceptable, morally and ethically acceptable, to take these 3 little monkeys or the 3 little rats and connect their brains together in some sort of super freak Borg crazy shit and make them talk? Like, why would we need that? Why would that? They can't even sell that shit to the dumb people to tell them, well, it's after a PTSD incident or brain injury, okay? It's not, that doesn't cut it. What reason, scientifically, would we have to connect to a hive mind? And when I was reading, they were talking about, being able to, have these brains work as a swarm intelligence. I mean, we are talking beyond lunacy here. Science fiction on steroids with no ethics. They're all out a window. And dopamine addicted psychopaths running the store, literally. All right, anyway. So scientists have linked together the brains of 3 monkeys, allowing the animals to join forces and control an avatar arm in research that raises the prospect of direct brain-to-brain interfaces in humans. And it makes me think of the Matrix. Like, sit in that chair and plug in the back of your head and be able to just enter the world of digital. In a second experiment, the brains of 4 rats were wired together in a brain net, enabling the rodents to synchronize their neuronal activity and collaboratively solve a simple weather forecasting problem that individual rats struggled to complete. So what is this? They're going to tell us that it's going to make us smart and superhuman. And so we just plug in and it'll be what? The next generation of the internet? Is that how they're going to sell this? It'll be the biological brain net. I mean, how do we leave our kids? How do we leave our kids with this as the future? I just don't get it. I really don't get it. This is so frightening to me. The experiments, which have echoes of the Borg, a sinister alien collective in Star Trek, challenges the notion that our minds will always be ultimately isolated from those of others. And again, I don't know about you, but I don't want my brain being part of any collective. Having them, we read about, and I don't know if I actually read the story, but I could later. We read about all the alphabet agencies being able to access your computer remotely, like we always said they could, and run applications, scan your hard drive, download all your data at a whim without you ever knowing. Well, don't you guys get it, man? Once you get online, you are now open to surveillance, and they want to bring every bodily cell online. That's the Internet of Things. Guess what, people? You're a thing. You're a node on the network. Mikhail Nicholas, a Duke University scientist behind the work, has previously pioneered the development of brain-machine interfaces that could allow amputees and paralyzed people to directly control prosthetic limbs and exoskeletons. And we've looked at some of those videos. It's been going on for a while. And yes, all these brain-controlled, mind-controlled devices. They even have, for the military, they're working on like mind-controlled F-16s, I think. They've been talking about that. And another thing that they wanted to do, they wanted to use this very technology with the brain net in military as well. And of course, it would be so we could save soldiers on the battlefield. But if they could have all a direct connect to each other's brains to know what the strategy is and know where everybody is simultaneously, we could be much better fighting machines. I personally say wait until you get your robot armies to make them do that. But maybe there'll be robot armies with, I don't know, we already saw them implant a worm brain into a Lego robot, and it was able to learn the layout of the room. So how much more powerful would a rat brain or a monkey brain be in an Atlas robot? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not too far of a stretch. So anyway, this Mikhail Nicholas, his latest advances have had clinical benefits in brain rehabilitation, but it could also pave the way for quote-unquote organic computers, collectives of animal brains linked together to solve problems. Essentially, we created a super brain, he said, a collective of brains created from 3 monkey brains. Nobody has ever done that before. He dismissed the comparisons with science fiction plots, however, saying, we are conditioned by movies and Hollywood to think that everything related to science is dangerous and scary. Those scary scenarios never crossed my mind, and I'm the one doing the experiments. Now, isn't it interesting how they put all this garbage out there, and then they tell us that, yeah, it's all movies and television that get your brain overactive to be thinking of these silly scenarios. The Borg will never be real. I don't know if I have that other story up here. No, and now I can't get the page to load. But there was a story that came out yesterday from one of the Global Atomic Energy Association heads and the headline of the story was, and I don't even remember, but the headline of the story was something like, the only reason the world hates nuclear power is because the Simpsons did it. Like, literally, she blamed it on the Simpsons. And the story was posted with a picture of Mr. Burns. Like, she literally was blaming the bad reputation for nuclear on the Simpsons TV show. And of course, people out there who don't think about anything go, oh, right, you know what? I'm just overreacting. I've just watched too much TV. Another dopamine-inducing invention. How amazing is that? All right. Anyway, let's get back to this dude blaming it all on crazy science fiction movies. All right. Anders Sandberg, a neuroethics researcher at the University of Oxford, said that the work was the most convincing demonstration yet that brains can be linked together in direct communication. You know, this other dude at Duke University saying that he never even thought of that before and there was no evil and he's the one doing the experiments. You mean to tell me that your brain didn't like wander down that path and think of Borg at all? Because I would have to say that he's lying. I mean, how could you not envision that if you connected brains together in some science fiction mad science gone mad experiment that's never been done before? I don't see how you could overlook that potential future while looking down the timeline. Either that or the guy has absolutely no forward thinking skills. Because I see about 30 timelines that all have that same nightmare scenario based upon this one event. And I'm not even trying. All right, back to this Anders Sandberg, the neuroethics guy at University of Oxford, said the work was the most convincing demonstration yet that brains can be linked together in direct communication. People have claimed digital telepathy in various cool demos, but it's mostly been hype, he said. I am quite impressed by this. It has a high gosh factor. Well, whoa. Sure has a gosh factor. How about psychopathic crazy factor? In the first study, scientists fitted 3 rhesus macaque monkeys with an array that could record electrical activity from hundreds of neurons in the motor regions of the brain. The monkeys learned independently to control the 3D movements of an avatar arm shown on a digital display in front of them just by imagining moving it. Now, when we start thinking also to this whole, another thing that creates dopamine and dopamine addiction, video games, and how realistic video games have become. And we've looked extensively, I've at least talked about extensively the whole merging of reality and fantasy and how they've really tried to blend that line and make one bleed into the other, not only with video games, but starting with reality television and those experiments that they've done showing the empathy and the love that's felt for characters in TV shows that people experience. I mean, they really have sucked us into these machines. So to be able to look at a screen and have some 3D avatar that you are able then to manipulate with your mind, I mean, how much different is that than thinking you need to move your arm and scratch your face? You know what I mean? You are going to have this whole alter world that your brain will be able to fully control. There won't be a joystick. There won't be a gamepad. You won't even be using like the Kinectics or the Wii where you have your avatar that can move when you move. It literally is just going to be done at the speed of thought. The monkeys were then given joint control of the arm, with each monkey able to control 2 out of the 3 dimensions, for instance, along the XY axes, and their activities made a 50% contribution to each. Although their brains were not directly wired together, the monkeys intuitively started to synchronize their brain activity, allowing them to move the arm collaboratively to reach for a virtual ball on the screen. The system appeared to work well, even if one of the monkeys was temporarily distracted. And it says, quote, if one of the monkeys dropped out in one trial, the brain net is resilient. Imagine if you had not 3, but 1 million. That would be extremely resilient. I mean, from a technology perspective, he's almost talking about what we used to call redundancy, and then we call it load balancing. It was a way to keep a network up and running at all times. You would have multiple computers and multiple CPUs that were working in conjunction and kind of load sharing all the processing. You were making like a private cloud back in those days. Now they have just the cloud that's being hosted in somebody's massive data center. By the way, you want to talk about a massive data center? Think about this for a second. I found a website yesterday that had real-time statistics. The question came up when I was talking with my friend. How many websites are there currently right now in the world? And apparently, at one point last year, we had finally broken 1 billion. That's with a B, 1 billion websites globally. But then the number dropped down a bit, and I don't know, they gave some weird description as to why. They said it was because there were some inactive ones, and some people let their domains expire and whatever. But that seemed to be a huge number, that we went from 1 billion websites and now we're at like 870 million. That was a lot of websites in a year just to disappear. I'm almost thinking that Cyber Patrol might have had something to do with it. Coming after sharing image or movie sharing sites. We talked about Kim.com and his mega upload. And I don't remember. I don't remember the other one. LimeWire used to be one. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know, though. I mean, but that was a huge number of websites that disappear in a year. But anyway, we're at like 870 million websites as of last night globally. But then there was another section where you could look at live real time, and then there were execution processes of different types of apps online. And one of them happened to be YouTube. You want to talk about they must have the most mega data center you have ever seen, Google, for running YouTube. They literally process, real time yesterday, they were processing over 100,000 videos playing every second. Now think about that for a second. 100,000 videos a second. 24/7. That is one honking huge distributed data center. If anyone's tried to stream video, and I mean, when we first started out the network, we had our own server that was hosted, and we were trying to do streaming video, and it was all right with, I think it was like a 2.3 gigahertz processor. We had 2 terabyte of memory. I don't remember how much hard drive size we had, but it was decent. But once you got up around 10 or 15 people trying to watch a video, forget it, man. It just didn't work. And that explains why, if you try to sign up for a video streaming service without any type of advertising, you're looking at a very, very expensive endeavor, because on the backside of things, it costs a lot to be able to do that and keep it stable when you need it to be scalable. So anyway, getting back to this brain net, I just wanted to bring that up because it just boggles my mind as to where we've finally gotten in the networking world. And we are talking about doing this with a biological now. I mean, literally, they're going to start using, we read about digital DNA already probably about a year ago, where they were using CATG, the different switches on our DNA to store information. And there was a book, I don't remember what the book was, but it was a really long book that they had managed to encode on a piece of DNA. And they were saying that the storage on DNA is so massively huge, because instead of, unlike a computer that's all zeros and ones, so you can either have it on or off, that's how you make all your information, is combinations of zeros and ones. We now have 4 different combinations that we could make with the 4 amino acids in DNA. So that makes it this exponential expansion of storage. And, thinking about it, if you take that new alien DNA that they've developed with the X and Y proteins that they've added. So now it's CATG and X and Y. Now that gives you 6, and that's a whole nother exponential expansion of not only storage, but like crazy mad science gone mad that they can play with injecting the synthetic into our biological. But they were saying that you could store literally every flutter of every butterfly and every word and grunt uttered from the beginnings of time until present day life in like a pound of this digital DNA. How sick is that? You know, every time I think about that story, I envision like a Jabba the Hutt sitting in the NSA data center. Biological storage, using living material to store and retrieve data. That's where we're going, people. Rat brains connected together, and soon to be your guinea pig brain, all connected together now to make a biological cloud. So anyway, back to this dude. Imagine if you had not 3, but 1 million. That would be extremely resilient. And he was talking about if somebody gets distracted in the collective, it doesn't cause it all to fall off the rails. Which, you know, I mean, that happens. If you do resiliency in a network and one processor, one hard drive fails, even if you had like a big RAID array of hard drives and you have them all data striped, so you're striping your data across 10 drives, let's say, instead of just storing it all to one, that gives you the ability to lose. And if you had 10 drives, you could lose quite a number of them. And it'll still be able to calculate what's missing and recreate that data. I mean, it's all about resiliency. All right. In a second paper also published in the Journal of Scientific Reports, the scientists directly linked the brains of rats together via two-way electrical connections that allowed the scientists to deliver stimulus to neurons and read out electrical activity. In one experiment, an electrical impulse was delivered to the brain of one rat, and the other rats learned to synchronize their brain activity, mimicking the first rat's brain response. And I'm going to say it was probably ouch. In a sense, they were experiencing what the first rat felt secondhand. Yeah, I don't think I want that. In another demonstration, pulses of stimulation that increased or decreased were delivered to the brains of individual rats, representing temperature and barometric pressure information. We read this yesterday. The rats were able to combine the information to produce a collective output that predicted an increased or decreased chance of rain. Rats scored better on this task when they were linked as a brain net than when they were individual rats and tried to combine the two pieces of initial information, temperature and pressure, to perform a simple calculation alone. Scientists said that in the future, the concept might be extended to produce neurally connected, here we go, ding ding, swarms of rats with collective intelligence. Now, what if they turn that into a horrifying weapon? You know, we've talked about the whole Plum Island and some of the Nazi scientist intervention that happened there, using insects as disease vectors to then spread it out into an unsuspecting public. And there's lots of nefarious stuff that we've read about and how they've been doing that testing on, I think it was 239 different populations documented just in the small time periods where they were utilizing different diseases or different insects to see how we could infect people. And then, oh, hey, lo and behold, look at problem reaction solution. Here comes Big Pharma with their defensive vaccination. Well, how horrible would it be? We've already seen remote-controlled cockroaches and remote-controlled moths where they put those nanowires right into their pupa when they were developing, so the nanowires grew into the brain, and they could literally remote control them once they became adults. How horrifying would it be to have an army of a swarm of controlled vermin, like the millions of rats underneath New York City loaded with disease, and set them loose to go after the insurgents. Think about that for a minute. Rats like will attack. They got rabies. They can bite people and gnaw off an arm. Oh, God, it's a new type of nightmare. Oh, I better not be thinking about that one tonight. This is super scary. Where's this shit in the headlines? This is super scary stuff. And any of the clueless American public, I would have to say, even if you had real difficulty with cognitive thought or creative thinking or being able to even add two and two together, understanding the ramifications of the story is not too difficult. And how many people would really go, wow, that's cool. I'm glad we're spending scientific dollars on studying, creating swarms of rats that could be used on who? You in the future. Nicolaus, he's the primary researcher at Duke University, said that in the long term, the work could have, oh yes, quote unquote, tremendous benefits for brain rehabilitation. There you go. Ding, 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 ding. After suffering a stroke, for instance, language abilities might be able to be restored more quickly if a patient brain was retrained by directly synchronizing it with the language regions of the brain of a healthy person. In humans, the link could potentially be made by non-invasively using electrodes on the scalp, however. Oh, but then he added, of course, so people didn't freak out, he added that it was unlikely that humans would ever be able to directly share complex mental experiences. Quote, "You're not going to share your emotions or personality to a brain net," he said. These are not reducible to a digital algorithm. Remember, people, it's all about the algorithm. You cannot reproduce these individual human attributes. Or, not yet. They haven't dug into those areas of the brain yet with DARPA money. I call bullshit on all of it. All of this. They are doing this, and you know it's going to be the collective at some point. You know it's going to be mind crime. You know that they want to know everything that you're thinking at every instant. And you are going to become a useless eater at some point. You know, I had a friend who used to tell me that the future was going to be that humans are going to have to, like, produce their own, I don't know if you'd call it electricity, but energy. Like, if you were going to take from the system, you'd have to output as well. And I mean, right now it's in physical work. But once the robots take all the jobs, and any of the jobs before the robots took them all got sucked out to Malaysia with the TPP, you know, it's not going to be this grand thinking utopia where we're all sitting around being fed grapes. It really isn't. They're going to have to find a way to make use out of you, you biological waste of space. So it's either going to be as a guinea pig for big pharma, slave labor maybe somewhere doing, I don't know what, compost, or hey, how about being part of the brain net to help solve all the problems of society. I don't know. I'm just postulating here, but I don't see any good. This is not, to be able to connect your brain to someone else's and do an imprint of somebody else's brain. I mean, if you were a stroke patient that had lost all their memory or their language capacity, again, it's always the desperate that have no other choices that are going to step right up for this. Especially if there's no other way that you're ever going to be you again. If they gave you even a glimmer of hope, it's the dangling carrot, and it looks like the promise. They're holding out their palms with that gift. But remember, this is one of my social studies teachers in junior high school. There is no free lunch. There is no free lunch anywhere. You know, I saw too, there was this application I ran across this weekend doing speech to text. We've had text to speech for a long time. I had a couple brainstorming ideas where I wanted to find some speech to text software, and I did a quick search, and lo and behold, what did I come up with? IBM Watson. IBM Watson is offering a free, and remember, Watson is their artificial intelligence from IBM. Watson, good old Watson, came up with he was the original founder of IBM, and he was the one that worked with the Nazis for the timing system for the trains that had all the punch cars that had everything running on time, shipping people from here to there. Watson is also the super brain that now is running a lot of the VA healthcare system. I predict we're going to see it running a lot of It's the super brain that's helping big pharma look at all of the uses for old drugs and find new uses, the black box uses of drugs. Well, IBM Watson is out there now doing speech to text translation, so you could feed actually it's a wave or an FL. I don't know what the format was, FLA, FL. It was some sort of flash audio file. You could feed it in, and it spits the text out to you. But one of the interesting things about it, and I'm mentioning this in regards to no free lunch, is that there's a checkbox, and it says, do you want, or you could speak into it too, you don't even have to upload, do you want to be able to use your speech to text to help Watson's AI learn? And you could opt in or opt out. So anybody who is using that freebie could be helping feed this AI machine. And remember, all this AI that's going on out there, they literally are using everything we do to scrape and learn and scrape and learn. I mean, YouTube, right? They were feeding that one of their AI, and I don't even remember the names of all these different projects. There's so many of them now. But Google was letting their AI creation go through and start running through YouTube videos to learn how to do things, and running through videos to start teaching these brains object identification. Remember, we read about that. They just broke some new threshold for being able to recognize things that aren't obvious as to what they are based upon context or whatever. And we're reaching a really scary point in technology now. And, you know, my friend and I sat up late last night, and I don't know how we even got on the topic, but we started talking about, like, old school computing, like our first Pong video game, and then the Atari, and then the Commodore 64, then the Tandy 1000. Then I had a 386, and then I remember I spent almost $3,000 like in my first real job, and where I had benefits, you know, and it was like a real job, and I got a loan. It was my first loan. God, it's my first real job out of college, so I must have been like 20, 21, though I had a student loan, but my first real, like, consumer loan was buying myself a 486 DX with the math coprocessor 266, if you remember. And it cost almost $3,000 for that sucker. But man, that thing screamed. And just how we went from that to this. In just a short 25 years, we've gone from the promise. I mean, I literally remember getting Pong in the 70s. It might have been 78, 77, 79 maybe. And my uncle, he used to come over to the house to play Pong because it was the coolest thing. Nobody had video games. I mean, there was the black screen with the paddles. It was just so novel and amazingly exciting. We were like, wow, look at where technology has come. And now we go from Pong to this. And this dystopian, crazy, no ethics, psychopaths, dopamine addicted lunatics running the show. It's just unbelievable. In 25 years, we have managed to put, I mean, not even looking at any of the ecological disasters that are going on everywhere and the complete and utter destruction of the biology that we depend upon in the ecosystem. But we literally have gotten at a cellular, at a DNA, at a genome level of self-destruction with the advent of this newfangled technology. It's just, I can't believe how they steered the ship right off the cliff. And it was so innocuous. And we bought into it. We got sucked into the dopamine-inducing addiction to our devices. All right. Anyway, so I think I've beaten this story to death. Let's go a little bit further. I don't know if I wanted to stay on this brain thing because there were a couple other stories that I wanted to hit, but we might have to do some of this tomorrow. Here, I'll tell you about this one though. This is one that a friend and I were listening to NPR late at night. Oh, I don't know if it was over the weekend or maybe it was last week, but there was a story about IBM's new super chip. And yes, IBM again. The best thing about IBM's super chip is it's not from Intel. Ha 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 ha. Yes, that's a joke, Wired. Wait till you guys hear this though. IBM says it has built a chip whose smallest features are about 7 nanometers wide, meaning that it could provide 4 times the capacity of today's chips. Basically, it packs far more resistors into the same space, and that means the data can travel more quickly on these resistors. The announcement made on Thursday was hailed as a breakthrough, evidence that semiconductors will continue to improve in years to come. And they had been saying that we'd hit Moore's Law, which is you can't make it any smaller or more powerful. They'd been predicting that for many years, that we were going to reach the end of the line of transistors. Apparently, IBM broke the ceiling. But I mean, when you think about this, 7 nanometers, we are reaching like nanoscale, guys, for something. They said that this transistor could be 4 times the capacity of today's chips. Think about how much more powerful that's going to be in this tiny little microscopic, tiny little thing that, I don't know. You know, my crazy brain starts spinning when I see headlines like this. And all I'm thinking is, wow, small enough to go in a, I don't know, vaccine. You know, this isn't cool at all. What are they going to do with these 7 nanometer chips that are 4 times the capacity of today's chips that could, run 100,000 videos a second globally, all connected together in some massive supercomputing cloud? Do we really need more? The announcement made on Thursday was hailed as a breakthrough, evidence that semiconductors would continue to improve in the years to come. But Patrick Moorhead, an analyst who closely follows the chip business, had a slightly different reaction. I believe Intel has done the same thing, he said already. Referring to the world's largest chip maker, they are just not telling people. Yeah, because guess who Intel works with? But I mean, IBM does too. Lots of federal government stuff, NASA, and the dark side of NASA is DARPA. So I'm certain that DARPA has their hands on a lot of processors as well. Remember, we looked at a story about Beidou a couple weeks ago. That is China's artificial intelligence product. The guy from Google who was actually working on their artificial intelligence left and went to the Chinese project. And it was the State Department. Are they the ones that block export? When we had read a story about Beidou's supercomputer artificial intelligence, and it said that it had chained together like thousands of these Intel chips. And they had taken the lead. Well, right after that, they banned export of these chips to China because it was, quote unquote, a national security risk. Anyway, it says the real takeaway from Thursday's announcement is that Intel may have more competition than previously thought. And that could be as important as the ongoing health of Moore's Law, the notion that the number of transistors on a chip doubles every 18 months or so. A company other than Intel has come out with technology that supports the notion of Moore's Law. You have to keep someone other than Intel doing this stuff, and it keeps the prices down. Well, thank goodness. And the chip investments up. And they don't talk about any of the scariness in this story. Hold on. There was another one. How small can they go? The 7 nanometer chip. This was the NPR story. IBM announced that a coalition of researchers has built the world's first computer chip featuring transistors just 7 nanometers wide. Get that? Yes, nanometers, very, very tiny. Small transistors mean more powerful chips, which in turn means smaller and more powerful devices like, smartphones. Yeah. We're not going to talk about any of the scarier stuff. Smartphones that cause your dopamine addiction. Developments like this come every 2 years approximately. That's known as Moore's Law, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know, somewhere in here they talk about comparing it to DNA. Oh, yes, here we go. If you look at these 2 pennies that I just dropped and held them between your finger, that width is the size of the transistor in this metaphor. And in reality, that transistor is now just a few times bigger than a strand of DNA. Now, I don't know. The second I saw that, I started to see flashes of what this technology could definitely be used for. We've talked about implantations. I mean, God, we just talked about monkey and rat brain connecting. Think about what that could do. All right, I babbled for already 50 minutes, so I'm going to run out of time, and I have so many stories from this weekend, so I guess we have a whole week of fun coming up. I'm going to end it up with this story, and this caught my attention, and it was amazing because it was right after the show on Friday, and as I read in, I found exactly what I've been looking for. Smokers, yes, good old smokers, may be at greater risk of developing psychosis. Oh, no. Agenda 21. Coming to a smoke pack in an Indian reservation near you. It's going to, I can see them already pushing this. You know, in New York, they've done it. They've banned smoking in a lot of bars and restaurants, most of them. You know, they're even going after people smoking in their own homes. Next, it'll be in your car. You can't smoke within, 500 feet of a building because, the dreaded secondhand smoke again. It's okay to drive behind a diesel bus that has no pollution control or to breathe in, any of the steam that's spewing off any of these nuclear reactors or, whoops, I don't know, we accidentally dumped it into the Mississippi River and you've been drinking it in your water. But God forbid you get an inhalation of a secondhand puff of smoke, it's going to kill you. We better demonize all the smokers who are such a taxation on the healthcare system, but not the people chowing down on McDonald's and high fructose corn syrup and connected to computers 24/7. Well, here we go. Smokers may be at greater risk of developing psychosis, says study. Man, I'm going to be just a basket case by the time I'm in retirement age between the Benadryl and the cigarette smoke. Researchers in the UK have suggested that smoking tobacco is linked to an increased risk of developing psychosis, while those who develop illnesses like schizophrenia are 3 times more likely to smoke than the general public. Now, let's go back to our whole week's worth of shows from last week. Because we discovered in our research, what area of the brain does nicotine interact with? What? Oh, are you saying the dopamine addiction center? Ding, 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 ding. Yes. And what section of the brain do they see is enlarged in people with psychopathic and narcissistic personality disorders? Yes, the dopamine section of the brain. Ding, ding, ding. So how interesting is it that research has shown that there's psychosis in smokers? Well, shouldn't they be then taking, and I don't know, let's read a little bit more, because I don't know if they ever mentioned dopamine in here at all, which tells me that they kind of missed a huge section of the study. The research was undertaken by the British University King's College London, with the material being published in Lancet Psychiatric Journal. While there have been numerous studies showing the association between smoking cigarettes and psychosis, very little research has been conducted to see if tobacco could have an impact in increasing the risk of psychosis. I'm telling you, people, I think either science is intentionally not pushing and looking at that dopamine button, or they are just so fucking clueless. How did we figure it out? Unscientifically, but it all connects together. It's the dopamine. Researchers analyzed 61 studies which gathered data from 15,000 smokers and 273,000 non-smokers, and found that 57% of those who went on to develop psychosis were, in fact, smokers. Oh, they do mention it. Quote, excess dopamine is the best biological explanation that we have for psychotic illnesses such as schizophrenia. Now, they've been doing all kinds of research on video games and on device addiction and dopamine. And so they've pretty much proven here that they think that it's the dopamine that causes psychosis, but nobody's looking at the long-term effects on society of all of this dopamine addiction. It is possible that nicotine exposure, by increasing the release of dopamine, causes psychosis to develop. Now that's pretty proven. Says Professor Sir Robin Murray, professor of psychiatric research at King's College, in this report. The report also found people who developed psychosis were 3 times more likely to be smokers than non-smokers, while regular tobacco users developed psychotic illnesses around a year earlier than non-smokers. And here's the thing. They're looking at smokers versus non-smokers, but they're not looking at how many of those people were gamers, how many of those people, did other illicit drugs like cocaine or heroin, how many of those people are tied to their cell phones, and any of the other behaviors that elicit dopamine production. How many of those people were on antidepressants or levodopa? They just looked at smoking in general. It has long been known that people with psychosis and psychotic illnesses such as schizophrenia are more likely to smoke both cannabis and tobacco, says Marjorie Wallace, the chief executive of mental health charity SANE. She added that scientists believe that there is a direct link between cannabis and the levels of dopamine, which is the, quote, chemical messenger of the brain, which is related to psychotic experience. However, there is less evidence of a similar relationship between nicotine and the brain. What we need is more research before taking further steps to deprive people whose only relief from the chaos and distress in their minds comes through smoking. We should aim to find ways of separating any beneficial components of both cannabis and tobacco which relieve mental pain, while eliminating those that can damage physical health as well as potentially contribute to psychotic illness. Are they talking, let's make some GMO cannabis and GMO tobacco that doesn't cause your brain to produce dopamine? However, it may be too early to take the finding too seriously at present, as the researchers said. Some of the studies they undertook did not take into account other factors. These include whether a smoker is also a regular marijuana user, as the drug has also been linked to the increased likelihood of developing a psychotic illness. Oh, God. Here we go. The psychopaths are running the asylum, but the psychopaths are pointing to you and me, talking about how we need to be looked at to make sure that we don't become psychopaths in their image. All right, guys. Well, that is going to about do it for today. Just trying to look if there is anything else that we want to hit with. Oh, here's one more really quick in the last minute. Another case of amoeba brain eating, this time in Minnesota, in a Minnesota lake. And the story's not going to load, but it was a teen who got that brain-eating amoeba from swimming in warm water. So be cautious when swimming any place that you're not familiar with. I mean, honestly, who knows? They said that the cases are very rare, but they happen. But how many? These never before seen. Look at, oh my God, it's appearing everywhere now, brain-eating amoebas. Sounds like another horror movie. All right, make sure you guys stick around. It is Monday night. I did a little rework on some of the schedule for Mondays. So we have a replay of Our Interesting Times with Tim Kelly at 6 p.m. Eastern. At 7, we have Neil Foster's Reality Bites from Saturday or Friday running at 7. Unlock the Door with Michael Cross at 8. Brand new Truth on the Tracks with Brandon Turberville at 9 p.m. Eastern. Cutting Through the Matrix, probably one you never heard, at 10 p.m. Eastern and live.
Republican field, there are some who are good fighters.
I don't know what that is, but with Nick and DB at 11. All right, guys, everybody take care. Have an awesome Monday, and I will catch up with you tomorrow.